Done. Awesome. So because all leaders deserve to have support, they need to excel, grow, and thrive. Kreek supports mid-career leaders and executives in the most difficult time of their lives and careers. Adam Kreek, welcome to the podcast.
Well, Glenn, it's great to be here. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So I'm really grateful you're able to kind of give your time today and share your story with the audience. And I actually have one story I want to share with you before we get into it. So as much as I've been a fan of your career for a while now, we've actually met before. Okay. And it's a good story. I think you'll get a kick out of it. I'm really intrigued. I want to share this with you right away before we get into the show. You guys had just won. I was 12 years old, 12, 13. You had just won your Olympic gold medal from Beijing. And you did a speech at my elementary school in Sudbury at ROBD. And I was there and met you. And we like chewed the fat. I was like 12. I have my first Facebook profile. I was just telling my girlfriend is like me with your medal that you had brought. And then I remember not having anything for you to like autograph. So I like grabbed a tag and ripped it off the thing. I was like, this is sick. Yeah, I'm just a big fan of the Olympics then. And I am now as well. So being able to kind of do that, I was like, I know he's not going to remember, but I think I definitely want to share that. So thank you for doing the show. And yeah.
Well, I definitely remember going to those schools and, signing ripped off tags, and kids will come up with tags or shoes or random pieces of paraphernalia for me to sign. That was
amazing.
Back in the day. That's probably 10, 15 years ago now.
Oh yeah. At least. Yeah, probably like right in the middle of that. Yeah, so we'll get into it then. Take us through so people kind of know and understand who you are and where you're coming from. Take us through your story from your transition, leaving post-secondary, like that time frame, and then we'll go full circle.
We'll go for full circle. Yeah. So right now I'm an executive business coach. I work one-on-one with leaders. I run strategy sessions for senior leadership teams, and then I deliver keynote speeches. And that, getting to where I am right now from high school was a non-traditional path, if you want to call it that. As I was going through high school, I was a little hesitant about going to university because I wanted to take a degree or study something that I would use growing up. I remember that being a big concern. I'm thinking, I don't want to go to school and just get an English degree and then not have something that I would be using completely. So I took time off after high school. I had a friend who had worked in Alberta and worked on the oil rigs up in northern Alberta. Jeez. So I set my sights on the oil rigs and I hopped on a train. So I had here's the thing, last year of high school, I got on a football recruiting trip to McMaster University. And at halftime, I participated in a pie eating contest where I ate 2 pumpkin pies faster than anyone else in that contest. And by winning that, I got a $250 via rail pass on train and $250. And I used that to purchase a one-way ticket to Alberta, where I registered for the petroleum industry training service. Yeah. I took a 6-week course. And as I waited for that, I picked up a temporary job building a Canadian Tire and filling things out. Took that course. Then I started getting jobs on the oil rigs. While I was taking the course, I was living with a family in the south of Edmonton and biking down to Leduc. So it was about an hour bike ride. And and after they saw that I was biking down for a couple weeks, they looked at me kind of funny. To me, it was normal. Oh, I'm just going to bike for an hour and then show up for 8 hours of class and bike home for an hour. It's just a normal thing to do. Yeah. I said, well, this kid wants to work, right? And he's got the energy. And so I performed well enough in the course, and I got a job with a drilling company. So I worked first as a lease hand, then a roughneck, then a motorman, on the oil rigs for about a year. And that was a really interesting experience, especially straight out of high school.
Yeah.
I made a ton of money that also helped fuel my education and eventually my athletic career after that. I had a turning point about 6 months into that work engagement where I was working in an accumulator shack, which is a place where all the hydraulics come together. I guess they're accumulated in a big machine, called the accumulator, where you manage all the hydraulics. And I was sitting there and I was scrubbing it, I was cleaning it, and there was my manager came up to me and was kind of yelling at me, wasn't a very nice guy, and didn't really had anger issues and took them out on me. I remember scrubbing them and then thinking back to a conversation I'd had with the geologist. Part of my job was to pick up samples that were coming out of this thing called a shaker and bring them to the geology shack. And I dropped it off and he was looking at the samples under a microscope. He was warm and I asked him how much he was getting paid, and he was getting paid about 4 times as much as me. And I thought, I think I'd rather be the geologist.
Yeah.
I'm a bit more my own boss. I'm not dealing with jerks and assholes. And I think I could do that. So I had the idea that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be, a geotechnical engineer or a geologist, someone who was working in the resource economy. That, and as I was scrubbing the accumulator shack, I had flashbacks to my high school sporting experience where I'd played a number of different sports: basketball, football, and rowing. But rowing was the one that captured my heart, and certainly my coach had said I had great potential in. He had taken me aside when I was 16 and said, "Hey, Adam, you're an Olympian. You just don't know it yet."
Amazing.
And so he had planted that seed of, oh, this is what you could do. And the path for going to the Olympics as a rower was to develop your skills through a university program, then try out for the national team, see if you could make a more junior national team, and then make the national team, then make the Olympic team. So I moved to, after that accumulator shack epiphany, I ended up taking a flight from I was working up somewhere up north, and I'm forgetting where it was, maybe the Peace River area, northern Alberta.
Oh, geez.
And then I came down to Edmonton. I flew to Victoria, and I went from minus 50 degree weather to, it was one of these like plus 14 days.
Yes. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes, old Sudbury boy.
Oh yeah.
You know the cold.
Oh yeah. Do we ever?
And so then I came down here, and I thought, well, I could deal with this weather. And 2, I visited the rowing coach who was excited to, have me come down and try out for the University of Victoria rowing team.
Mm-hmm.
So I came down and I rowed with the university team for 2 years. I started my studies. And after the first summer, I made the under 23 national team. We went to Linz, Austria. We won the world championships for under 23s. And that pushed me towards trying out and making the senior national team that next year, where I ended up going to Seville, Spain, where we won the world championships as well. After that, we had a really good team, a really great coach, and we were making a push for the Olympics. So I dropped out of university, and I said, I'm focusing on this Olympic dream. That's more important. I can keep going on my schooling whenever I want.
Right.
So I went and I spent the next 2 years focused on that Olympic dream, Olympic journey. We won a bunch of World Cup races and the World Championship in Milan, Italy. Then we went to the Olympics in 2004 as the favorites, expecting to win, and we choked. We fell apart at the Athens Olympics. So that was devastating. But over the process of going there, I was introduced to the coach of the Stanford rowing team, who was building a program down there. He was the previous coach of one of my teammates, Jake Wetzel. So Craig Amerkanian from Stanford University recruited me to come down as a bit of a player coach, to come and and row for the Stanford team, as well as coach some of the younger guys. And when I came back to school, everyone joked, they called me Old Man Kreek because I was 24 and they were aged 18 to 21. So that's big difference.
Big difference
at at that age. But there I was, and I was also came down as I was engaged to the woman I eventually married, and so that blew people's minds too, right? You only one more vagina for the rest of your life. What's happening? But there we
Amazing.
were. And there I was, this older guy, engaged in a serious long-term relationship, and younger guys just coaching them. And I finished up my degree there. I enjoyed the challenge. I enjoyed studying earth sciences. And we got to a turning point where I had one of my professors had offered me a full ride scholarship to get my master's degree at Stanford University in petroleum engineering.
No kidding.
I was interested in biofuels and biodiesel. I had built a biodiesel reactor as my senior thesis project.
Jeez.
And so I was turning waste cooking oil into fuel for my car. And then my wife was also studying behavior change and climate change, and was, interested in getting her PhD, and had lines on, getting her PhD down there. So we had this opportunity in this debate, and this trying to figure out what is the right decision to make.
Yeah.
Because we either had the decision to stay in California, in the Bay Area, which is very engaging, a wonderful place to be, the Stanford campus, which I still have wonderful memories of to this day, which is, or come up and pursue the Olympic dream. My wife, she is very concerned about climate change at the time, and wanted to write policy for the provincial government of British Columbia. So we ended up going through a decision-making matrix, and I can share it with you after this conversation.
Please. I'm really intrigued.
And it would be useful for your, probably for your listeners. And the decision-making matrix, especially when you're a young person, you have a lot of really good opportunities. And the challenge is often deciding between a good choice and a bad choice.
Or even a good choice and a great choice, I've found as well. Because it's like, they're so good. It's like, well, I wish it was great and really bad. It'd be a lot easier. But geez.
So and the process is pretty simple. One, determine what your must-haves are, and make sure that both of your options are things that you can achieve your must-haves through both options. And then once you understand that, writing down the pros and cons for each choice. And then you turn the cons into positive statements, because often we let our decisions be driven by fear versus driven by opportunity.
Right.
Very true. So we then switch it so you have supporting arguments for each choice. Yeah. And then you go through and you rank each choice from a scale of 1 to 10, and that gives you a clarity of choice. And we basically went through that to decide, do we follow this opportunity in California? Do we go back up? And we came up to Canada. We moved onto a float home on Fisherman's Wharf, where we lived there on a home floating on the water, which was pretty wonderful.
Yeah. What was that like?
Romantic.
Amazing.
You wake up in the morning, and when it's stormy, it was horrible, to be honest. It was the worst. When the wind was blowing, that was awful, because there's a mild amount of terror, but then when the weather's calm and nice, it was very, very beautiful. We even had a hole in the bottom of the floor that we would open up and throw fish guts down, and the seals would come up.
Come on.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So it was a great place to live as a young couple. And we lived there, and my wife wrote policy for the BC government, worked with the Premier's office, and then I pursued the Olympic dream. I joined back up with a really incredible group of guys, and we had a great coach, great support staff. and everything came together this time. We won the Munich World Championships, then we won the Olympics in 2008,
Epic.
which was, ultimate great thrill and an incredible sporting experience.
Mm-hmm.
So the sporting experience then led to a, okay, now what's next? So again, the same sort of thing you're dealing with after high school or after university, you're still dealing with after sport. So Olympic athletes, professional athletes, deal with this, at that point in time in that transition.
Right.
For me, I was and still am very entrepreneurial. I like to, forge my own path, do things in my own way. So I started a biofuel company and started speaking more professionally. And that's how you and I met up with one another in Sudbury.
Amazing.
I was up there, I think, with an organization called Clean Air Champions, if I remember appropriately.
Yeah, that's right.
I
couldn't remember for the life of me, man.
Like, we were encouraging active transportation, ride your bike to school or, walk to school a little bit more. And if you did that, you get a prize. And so I traveled around. I did, I had some experience when I was an athlete visiting schools and doing school visits, and even afterwards I did that a bit, but I had my focus more on mid-career leaders, and I was thrust into that, and I began to focus my messaging on teamwork, leadership, managing change, setting goals, that sort of thing. And I struggled for a while to figure out how my story and my message could actually resonate with people who were working, had a working life and were beginning to raise a family and dealing with the change, the headaches of organizational life. Yeah. So I started simply by dialing in my story, understanding my archetypal story, which is a great tool, and I think it's good from a personal development standpoint.
100%.
So the story was, here I was, and this is the one I still tell. I'm a kid. I grew up in London, Ontario, in southwestern Ontario, an average kid in an average town, and I was excited to grow up and kind of live an average life. And everything changed when my coach took me aside and said, "Hey, look, you're an Olympian. You just don't know it yet." And that planted a seed, and that kept popping up even when I was, decided to take my own path and go work on the oil rigs and do, and jump into career life. But that, the weight of potential is a heavy weight, especially when you're young, when you're a young adult. And so I took that and I met incredible people. I had a great coach, this British coach, who'd say things like, "Hey, friendships, they come and go, but gold medals, they last forever."
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
No. That's amazing.
And, and we went through various challenges. We failed at the Athens Olympics. We had personality challenges. You just had the challenge of trying to push yourself to excellence. And we came away. as victors in 2008. And the biggest lesson that I took from that journey and from this archetypal journey is that success isn't final and failure isn't fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. That is the biggest lesson. The lesson that, achievements are great in the moment of achievement and failures are horrible in the moments of failure. And especially when you're a young adult, you experience big failures, and they are of a large size when you are, in your 20s, in your 30s. They are, and they feel like they're of a large size. And your job in early adulthood is to achieve things. Your job in your 20s and 30s is to achieve things, to prove to yourself that you can achieve. You can set your mind to a goal and you can accomplish it. That is your job. And then, as you transition, into middle adulthood, you start to take account of all the choices that you've made in your life. And you've made choices which have led you down a certain path. And there's going to be some regrets that you have with those choices. And you're going to feel restricted and constrained because you have responsibilities. Maybe you have a family. That's typically the most challenging time, the least happy time scientifically in your life. And then as you move through and you start to understand and lean into the life that you have in middle life, you move into late staged adulthood, where your biggest concerns are, the love and relationships that you have in your life, and living with full integrity with who you are. And the people who have the biggest issues late in life are the ones who don't discover who they are, and they don't live integrity with themselves. They destroy relationships along the way, and they don't achieve anything of note while they're younger. So it's really important in your young adulthood, when you're leaving high school, when you're early in your career, that you do have the energy and the opportunity. There's so many opportunities to go in many different directions, but I think from what I see from, if I was to give one piece of advice to people leaving leaving high school, is to set your sight on something and look to achieve it. And that comes back to my life lesson that I learned is in that phase, that hopefully the listeners can learn, is success isn't final. Failure isn't fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. And by achieving and failing and gaining the wins in the process, and taking stock of the losses, we understand who we are and what our place is, and we're able to find more peace in progress, more peace in the path. And that's what I learned, I suppose, coming back to this idea of delivering speeches after the Olympics, the archetypal story and how that helped. Then that, as I started delivering speeches, I got involved in a few other businesses. One was this rowboat making business here in Victoria, BC, and I was helping them promote and sell and deliver their boats all around the world. And through them, I met this guy in Seattle, Jordan Hansen, who loved to row, and he had this program where he wanted to row across the Atlantic Ocean.
Amazing.
And he and I joined up and we said, let's do this. We raised, $500,000 from put that together and put together a boat and shipped it over to Africa and rowed after 4 years. It took 4 years of planning and selling and going out there. I think I was lucky because I was in the public speaking world and I was constantly exposed to new audiences. And that was part of my speech at the end. What are you doing next? I'm rowing across the ocean. Does anyone want to help me? And people
that's brilliant, by the way.
Yeah, people wanted to. And eventually the way I found our title sponsor, who ended up giving us, over $250,000. I talked my way into this place called the Sponsorship Forum, where the guy opened it up, Mark, I believe his name was, and he said, hey, does anyone have any questions here? Anyone want to say anything? And I just, without thinking, I shot my hand up, and they puts the mic in front of me, and you have this, where your throat starts to close up and your heart starts beating. I had one of those moments where I'm like, holy crap, what am I going to do? And get up, oh, hi, my name's Adam Kreek. I just went to the Olympics. I won a gold medal. And now myself and three gentlemen, we're going to row across the ocean. We're looking for sponsors. So through that, I get attracted to this, or this guy comes up to me and talks to me and says, hey man, I love what you're doing. I want to introduce you to this person. I want to help you out. So he introduces me to one person, who introduces me to another person, who introduces me to the person who eventually becomes our title sponsor. And after interacting with them about half a dozen times, they sign on the dotted line, and we get the money in the bank, and the expedition is a go. And then the moment we had them, it was easier to just start piecing together a bunch of these other, $10,000, $15,000 sponsors to
Yeah.
to sponsor the event. And it wasn't just about rowing across the ocean. Of course, it was about educating youth. We interacted with, I think, with about 35,000 kids in schools in America, Canada, and West Africa. And we had 8 different science experiments on our boat. And so that was the bigger vision that attracted the sponsorship, because people don't want to sponsor your adventure. They want to sponsor a project that
like a cause or something along those lines. Makes sense for sure. Yeah.
And so that's, and that sort of drives in, are you, into what I do now, which is about understanding truly what you value and what are the values that you are representing. And one of the pieces of our row was certainly about generous impact and giving back. And again, talking about this lesson I learned from the Olympic journey: success isn't final, failure isn't fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. That, where does that courage to continue come from?
Mm-hmm.
Because life can be tough and things don't always work out. Well, the courage to continue comes from the ability to live in alignment with your values. Live in alignment with your authentic self, to make sure that you understand what your purpose is, and to have the right heart set. Courage is the combination of of love and negative emotions. So love and fear, or love and regret, or love and resentment. And you try to put it together and keep moving forward to figure out what that next step is. And one of the easiest tools I've found to do that is by understanding what you value, what your purpose is, and making sure that you're making decisions in alignment with that. And when you fail in alignment with your values, when you fail in alignment with your purpose, that failure stings less, and you can find more benefit from it, and more sprouts out of it. And that was the story, I suppose, of our row across the ocean, because after we launched, 73 days in, our boat capsized. We didn't make it to the other side. And again, it wasn't just that we capsized. We had 35,000 school kids watching us when we capsized. So picture the teachers or the kids who are watching. Like, oh, look, these guys that we're following, are they going to be okay? Ooh.
Yeah. No kidding.
So
Jeez.
that felt like a failure, but at the end of the day, we set the goal in alignment with our values, with these ideals of service, of science, of giving back, and sharing this experience with so many other people. And that really made the adventure actually feel like some odd kind of success, even though we didn't achieve our main objective. We were successful from a safety standpoint, and we created what we called a happy fail. When you fail, when things don't work out, but it ends up working out well for us. And so then after that event, I got back home. We were working on our second child, or the second child got born, and I got back on the speaking circuit and built out I had a TED Talk, delivered a TED Talk. That was a big accomplishment then. And then wrote a book, published a book. And as time progressed, I moved from just speaking and sharing my story into developing leaders with tools and toolkits. So helping leaders understand what drives them. So better understanding their personality, their values, their core basic needs. Helping leaders understand the mechanics of business administration. So how do you run better meetings? How do you make sure that you have the right strategy? Do you have an execution framework? Great side story. I've been working with one of my old teammates to build a mortgage company. It's now the fastest growing mortgage brokerage in Canada.
Amazing.
And so we laugh as we integrate a lot of these systems, because it was a lot of these systems we use in business were just like we used as an Olympic athlete. How do you motivate people to do the work and get people driven, and set up the reward structure, set up the support structure, set up the reporting structure so that people are engaged, motivated, and the company makes profit. And it's really mind-blowing how well the business is doing, and how by just applying the lessons of sport to business can drive tremendous success. And I've seen it in obviously another number of other industries. I do a lot of work in the aerospace industry, finance, and even within like municipal governments and federal governments, military. I've been doing a lot of work with the military as well, which is interesting. We just did a training with a bunch of reservists who are going over to Latvia and on the border of the Ukraine.
Jeez. Yeah, no kidding.
So there's a lot of transfer from the skills that I learned through sport, but then that's accentuated just through being exposed to the different levels of leadership through my role as a speaker, which has now turned into a trainer and a coach to support leaders in their careers, help them have a bigger impact, help them get the earnings they want, the independence they want, and also attain the leadership impact they want, and that will drive them forward. And a lot of it comes to back to this idea of making sure that we're living in alignment with our values, that our goals are fulfilling our purpose, and we're setting the right boundaries in our life to achieve our end goals. And because you have to create a life strategy where you're saying no to many things,
which is tough to do.
Just say yes to the right things. So that's the general story. So
amazing.
To oil rig, to university athlete, to university dropout, Olympic failure, university success, to Olympic success, to post-Olympics, building a biofuel company, which I didn't get into too much, where it grew, it failed, it's still alive. It's been rebuilt a few times, and I'm still involved as a director. But I've rowing across the ocean and turning a motivational speaking career into a consulting and coaching career, where I still do keynotes, which I do enjoy, but I'm mostly, I see I have a much bigger impact in these one-on-one in engagements. So that's truly what I love to do.
I find it's a different way of connecting with somebody when they're in just the one-on-one sort of relationship, or the communication that just, I find in group settings, it's tough because you feel a bit of a disconnect, right, from people. And especially if you don't feel that what the person might be talking to is relevant to you, you tune out more than just what they just said that might not be relevant. Where it's like, if it's you and I, it's just you and I, right? There's no, you're talking to three other people. It's no. So that's interesting. What I'm curious about, there's a few things. I've talked to a handful of Olympians on the show, and just friends and family, whatever, they always talk about when you achieve like a really big, like potential fulfilled, almost in your case with the rowing Olympic gold medal. How do you, like, what's that after shock like you've reached it? Like, is there a depression, or is there like just a switch of like, oh, on to the next thing? And if there is the depression, like, how do you bounce back out of that?
There is an element of depression that comes afterwards, because as you get closer and closer to a goal, your brain naturally releases more neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonins, epinephrines, norepinephrines. And so building towards a large 12-year goal becomes, it's a massive hit. and then all of a sudden you're standing on the podium and you're seeing your flag being raised and you're being celebrated. It's a great moment, and then people are celebrating that great moment, and you're just flooded with all of these good, hormones and emotions. You're saying, this is amazing. I want to do that again. and then 1 month later, when's that, your brain starts saying, when's that podium thing going to show up? When are we going to have that flag and the songs and the celebrations and the party? Are we going to do that again? No? Okay.
No.
Yeah. How about now?
No, we'll figure it out. We'll figure something else out, I guess.
We'll figure out something.
Yeah.
So there's, I think that there is I personally felt, emptiness after, certainly after the Olympics, but I felt like I dealt with it more earlier on in my career, where I had, or I felt more of an element of listlessness when we first won our world championships. And that's when I couldn't articulate it at the time, but that's when I first truly started to live more of a values-driven life. Because we had won the world championships, and picture this, you're 22 years old, you're heavyweight champion of the world, it's the first time the Canadian men's eight had ever won a world champs. So history, you made history, you're feeling pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But then,
for sure.
But then you feel but then I remember getting back to Victoria, where we were training and living at the time, and just thinking and feeling depressed and listless and lacking motivation. And as I went through this, mild existential crisis, trying to look for a little bit more, meaning and purpose, I did a couple things. One, I started visiting schools and, speaking in schools. And two, I became a big brother through Big Brothers and Sisters.
Amazing.
And those two things, they're in alignment with my, my personal value set. I value making a loving connection with people, and I value leaving a generous impact on, on the world and those I interact with. And I wasn't, I was able to make deep connections with the people I was rowing with, but sometimes when you're in competition, the bonds are slightly different.
For sure, yeah.
And then from an impact standpoint, athletics and athletic pursuit is very selfish. Achievement is selfish in and of itself.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so to achieve is like, oh, it's for me, which I think, again, is good, and you need to do it. Like I said, if you achieve nothing in your 20s and 30s, you're going to pay for it in your 40s, 50s, 60s. So it's really important to lean into your youth and find something that you can work on and gain some expertise and build your skills. So the transition from sport, it gave me pause to think and try to figure out how to align a career with my purpose and my values. And that's why I stayed on the track of one, teaching and training, and then eventually moved into, strategic planning and executive coaching, because it was alignment with who I am, and, what my gifts were, what my skill set was, and what my values were, what my purpose is. And so then, but then it is difficult making a transition, because you're moving so slow. When you're at the top of the game and the top of your field, you can have an urgency and execute upon that urgency and see the results. But when you're starting again at the bottom of the ladder, it can be very, very frustrating. And business and results don't come as quickly as you would otherwise think. So there is that point in time where when you're transitioning from athletics, and your brain is craving the high, and then you're not having the results that you want as fast as you want. And so that's I think that's just a normal experience, right? That's a normal experience of life. And it's, it happens to athletes, but I think sometimes it also happens to people when they graduate from university, or you jump into a trade and you say, okay, I've got this trade, but wait a second, it takes years to become to become a red seal at your trade. Or you start a business, you think you understand that business, or you start a podcast, it takes years to really slot in and gain mastery of all the different pieces and put
one
it
day
together.
at a time.
Yeah, one day
one day at a time.
Right. And we have to remind ourselves of that, because that there's power in having big vision, being able to see the future, but then it's
100%.
It can also be exhausting and demotivating. So it's it's remembering to focus on the small steps and the small wins.
That's huge. And I think there's something to be said for that. Like I know a handful of people that have gone through this where it's like you said, urgency. It's like, we're switching it. Nobody wants to go halfway up the hill and go, we can't take this path, go back down and then start climbing again. It's not fun. And like you said, especially if you're at an expert level or world or global scale of something, being able to kind of restart and do that is very, very, it's hard. It's not easy. Even just trying new things is tough, right? We get so comfortable, so easy doing stuff like that we want to be able to make our own or make something out of. And I find myself every day having those like conscious decisions where I'm like, okay, yeah, just, like doing the research on guests, like just, okay, do a bit more, or read these books about conversation and charisma, like those little things that you can do that it's tough to pick up a book and read it, let alone read it when you're doing 100 different things and trying to scale everything at once, right? Is being able to kind of be patient at the same time, I think, is a very, very interesting skill set. And I'm wondering if there's an underrated skill that you've seen in your years that has been something that's made the transition from whether it be Olympics to business or business to speaking, stuff like that. If there's a skill that you would preach to people, that's like, this is one to develop to make that process smoother.
To hurry slowly.
Essentially, yeah.
Yes. I'm a big fan of meditation.
Interesting.
And meditation it took me a while to discover it. When I was a rower, I was essentially meditating for 4 to 6 hours every single day. It was just the nature of our sport, because you're focusing so intently on this boring ass motion, right? Blade in the water, pull, take the blade out over and over. Now I'm going to move my hand like this. Now move it like that. Now move it just, no, yeah, okay. And so it's an intense amount of focus on a fairly benign and esoteric movement.
Right.
And it was maybe 2 years after I had retired from Olympic training, and I was still doing some, bike riding and, getting out there and adventuring, but I didn't have the same, daily discipline of that style of sport. When I was introduced to Transcendental Meditation, which is, it's a form of meditation where you get I'll call it a nonsense word, but I think they'll call it some kind of spiritual word that you're saying over
Always.
and over in your head, and you focus on the word, and then sometimes thoughts come up and sometimes no thoughts come up. Other times you have these transcend feelings, or you'll have like your nervous system will send a shock from your head down into your groin, and you'll feel like you're vibrating. Other times you'll just be there and nothing will happen. But learning how to meditate and get into a meditative state, I'd recognized it as an athlete, and I think that was one of the reasons why I was attracted to the sport, because that's what helped me focus. Is meditation. And I'll find that if I don't keep up my meditation practice, I start to lose control of my focus and my emotions more than I would like. And, as an Olympian and someone who has high personal standards, you start to you start to beat yourself up when you're not living up to that standard.
Right.
And that I've found is one of the most reliable interventions when things start to not work out for me, is to start sitting down and meditating twice a day for 20 minutes. Ironically, I don't feel the effects in the first day or two, but by day 4 or 5, everything just clicks back into what I need it to be.
Whoa.
And so it's a fascinating exercise. And so I'd say that's one piece. And even from a meditation standpoint, this is an exercise I do on a regular basis as I'm sitting here in front of my computer. I've drawn a little target that you've seen right here. Yeah. And I do 30 seconds on, 1 minute off, 60 seconds on, 1 minute off, 90 seconds on, 1 minute off, before I have to do a long period of work in front of my computer screen. Because otherwise I find it's hard to focus. But I'll do that, and I try to focus right at the center point of the target. And I'll notice for the first 30 seconds it's hard to focus, and then I can get it. Then I take a break, and I go back and take a break, and then I do it again. And that actually comes from some scientific research out of Japan, where they showed when kids would do this exercise before they work, they actually were able to perform at a higher level.
So you're like priming your brain for focus or long-term focus that's about to occur.
Which makes sense, because as an athlete, I would prime my body. I would do activation exercises. I would do stretches. I would warm up before I would do my work. And so this is just the same. I'm doing brain work. So can I prime my brain to do the work that needs to be done? So so figuring out how to rush slowly, meditation, focus, being present. Often the anxiety comes when we're living too far in the future, and we're constantly trying to make plans or juggle things, or or worrying about, am I doing the right thing, or we feel overwhelmed because we're carrying too much in our brain. So that tends to be what works for me, in this, as I work as a knowledge worker, essentially, meditation, focusing on that, writing everything down. I write lists all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
All the time. Lists. But those are the ways that, I've found useful to, to stay focused. That, and getting a coach. I've hired many coaches, and I have a coach now, just to make sure that I'm focusing on the right things, and I'm working with other people, because I do a lot of work alone. So I need to make sure that I have an element of accountability and a soundboard outside of myself, just to help bring, again, focus. So much of it is about focus. So meditation for focus, lists for focus, focusing on targets for focus, talking to the coach for focus. Am I doing the right thing at the right time? Because I only have so much time and energy to achieve what I want to achieve.
Right. And the execution in that, I think, is huge, right? Being able to figure out, like, I think the last, because I had this recently happen to me, like something similar to what you're talking about, where I did, it was a weird depression. Like, it was a couple of weeks. I just wasn't sure, like, the business was doing well. So I was like, what's going on? Podcast was doing well. So I was like, this is weird. But just really weird anxiety. So going through kind of figuring out, I went for a swim because I'm training to do this marathon in Lake Huron this summer, but I was in the water swimming in the pool and going through my brain, looking back and going, the time that I was most productive was in the last year of college, where all I did was lists and meditate. Not twice a day. I'm not as a hardcore, but I did do it once a day. It was like I had like a 10 to 15-minute regimen where it was similar, trying to bring myself back to, yeah, like you said, the present moment. All right, and realizing how important that is. And it's not so much just the whole, like, you're living out here. It's like, just bring it back, live now. Don't worry about everything that you can't control, because the future is going to happen eventually anyway. Why rush it? Right.
Exactly. Well, and it's the process of centering, of grounding, of being in your authentic self. When we're thinking of the future and we're thinking of things that we can't control, we're out here, we're looking around, and there's benefit to that, and there's benefit to you pulling in lots of different pieces of information, integrating it, and creating something new from that.
Mm-hmm.
But the crux of it is the ability to do work, and it's a lifelong discipline. It's and you call it a discipline because I don't feel like I'll ever perfect it. I think I'll have ideals and demands on myself larger than I'll ever be able to perform.
Right.
Like there's a humility even that you have to bring, to your tasks and your work, that that sometimes the work can be, can feel so great, but like, these little depressions and lacks of motivation, they're real, and they're constant, and I don't think that they ever leave. But when you understand the discipline of it, you can be less anxious about the depression, or you can be less anxious about the lack of you say, oh well, am I doing my work readiness routine? Am I writing down my list, my priorities? Am I doing my meditation? Am I engaging my focus? Am I remembering what I'm grateful for? Am I living my values? Am I moving? Am I expressing my purpose? And reminding yourself of these things and slowing down, allows you to achieve more and create more. At the end of the day, I think we're happiest as humans when we are creating.
I think so too. And it's something that has been very, very, like, almost shunned in what seems to be recent years, where the ability to create is huge, but there's a lot of turn away to it, because I guess it almost seems like everything's the same. Like, good luck doing something new. Right. It's like, it's just a different version of something else somebody's already done, which is tough, because sometimes it's like you want to feel so good being able to create and have your own ideas come to life. Right. But then at the same time, you're battling I think it's all just the way media is portrayed, but that's just another thing altogether. So,
yeah, well, I agree with you. It is a competitive marketplace, yet, each of us has a voice that brings a unique perspective to play, and the audience that finds it and listens to it can gain a lot from it. So it's about creation, but what I've also found is that it's also about marketing. You have to create it, then you have to work on getting the word out there about what you've created, and can you market your content as well as you can make the most beautiful thing, and if nobody hears about it or nobody knows about it, then it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, you don't say. So I have a good friend of mine who's going to attempt to be the largest person this summer to swim going to attempt to be the first person to swim the largest freshwater island in the world, Manitoulin Island on George Bay. Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah, right. So it's 350 kilometers. It's going to be a month straight of marathon swims. So I'm looking forward to doing a day with him for sure. That's the 10K I was mentioning training for. But what the vision is ideally using that as a platform or stepping stone to push and drive a similar, like a speaking career.
Mm-hmm.
And so for people similar to him who've done something big or have done a few things that are big or of scale as like what the world would consider, and then how would you, like, any advice for people stepping into a speaking role? Like, what makes a good keynote speech to you?
Well, the best keynote speeches are driven by personal experience, one. Two, you are sharing your learnings along the way. And the learnings are usually at your low points or your points of weakness. If you come up and you say, I swam around Manitoulin Island because I am the best, blah, 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 and you can learn from me because I'm the best, that sucks. So
yeah, for sure.
People are most interested in the challenges you've faced on your journey and the people that you've met and the lessons that they've taught you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can share a story, and I talked about the archetypal story where you have an origin, where did you come from? You cross a threshold, who or what pushed you across the threshold? You go into another world, which is very unique. So you swim around Manitoulin Island, maybe you run across some fish or you have a crazy experience at that time. And then you come on the other side and you've learned something. So what did you learn from that journey? And what can you share from that? And so that's the general story framework. And then if someone's looking to build a career in as a speaker, you have to keep giving speeches until people come up to you afterwards and ask you to give other ones. And if you give a speech and two people come up afterwards and say, hey, I'd like you to speak at my event, and then you go and you speak twice, and at each of those two events, after that, two people come up to you and ask you to speak at their events, then you're on to something.
Yeah.
So the challenge, though, is to build up the competence and to put in the reps, because you're not going to start as a speaker with a great speech.
No.
You probably have to rework. I'd say for every minute you deliver in a great speech, you should probably have an hour of practice. So a 60-minute speech, you should probably have at least 60 hours of practice. And that's just to deliver the first one. And you'll be really excellent at it after a few years of doing it. And, you'll probably need 5,000-10,000 hours of delivering speeches to be able to truly own the stage and to give great speeches. So that, to turn that into a full career, it has to be, again, about more than the swim, because people don't want to hear, they'd be curious to hear about the swim.
It only goes so far though, right?
Well, it goes so far, and what is the market for that? I think you can have you can have some fun telling stories, and you need to decide where you want to go with it, because you could write adventure stories and tell and go on other adventures and use that to fuel your use your storytelling and writing and creation to fuel future adventures, which is a valid thing to do, but that requires that's a lot of work. So I'd be curious as to what, and I guess it's what I can speak to is my own experience, in that I learned how to frame my own story in the context of mid-career leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in using my story of going to the Olympics, of rowing across an ocean, and framing it, as people are going through change, or as people are leading others or building teams, is a useful, useful skill set. And you can see it. You can see it on my, because I've got a book, The Responsibility Ethic, how I've made that into it. The book is you can download the audiobook for free on YouTube. We've uploaded it there, or you can buy it on platforms. I know my little brother, through Big Brothers and Sisters, I gave him all the electronic documents, so he's uploaded it to the free part of the web too, for all you cheap people just leaving high school. Pay for anything. It should be out there. Because I too was once like you. I now buy all my books on Audible just because it's easier.
I can relate. Yeah. Amazing. So that's a good transition, actually. With the being a coach for mid-level career and executives, what has been something in terms of, like, do you have a favorite moment that's occurred so far, or like a breakthrough moment that's just kind of like, that's really been, like, I'm trying to articulate it, but it's really kind of felt your purpose fulfilled when you do something like that? Like, do you have a example of one that you're able to share, or just
I feel like I'm doing it every single day as I work with these leaders and I have the conversations. I had one this morning, and I was working with this guy who's been in his industry for 40 years, and we're working through different leadership and management principles, and I'm supporting him, and he's growing his business, and we're making steps forward, and I love it. I love the conversations. I love learning from these individuals, learning from these leaders, and sharing the knowledge I've learned from others. Yesterday I worked with a couple of other leaders. One, she runs a pathology group down in California, and again, she's dealing with issues with the board, board leaning into her, and so we're working through some of these challenges and problems, and setting up her career and setting up her business so that she can live with integrity and keep the business alive and support the people she's leading, and deliver demands to the board. And so I'd say I'm reminded that I'm doing the right thing every single day that I do it. I am not reminded that I'm doing the right thing when I have to lean into marketing and self-promotion and pushing myself out there, because that's what I do not enjoy. I'm naturally, it's funny because if you look around, I'm very out there, but I'm naturally a very, I enjoy connecting with people, but I'm happy to be very private. And but again, I've overcome that drive for privacy with this desire to serve mid-level leaders, and that's more of the driving force that's out there. So doing the work motivates all the other administrative back-end pieces that are required to have a business like this, because it's the work is very enjoyable, but the other pieces are necessary. So you have to have marketing, you have to track your expenses, you have to do the finances, you have to put it together, the strategic plan, you have to create the content, you have to put things out there, you have to build the relationships, you got to take the risks. So I truly enjoy doing the work. Doing the work to do the work is less enjoyable. But it is necessary.
You don't say.
So thus the meditation, the lists, the target of focus, the coach.
Amazing. So Adam, as we kind of get to the tail end of the conversation today, do you have one final piece or message that you'd like to share, or story you want to share, or piece of advice or lesson that you'd like to share with the audience today before we close?
Well, I just want to reiterate the point. When you are a young person, you need to achieve something. So you need to achieve something hard. So don't fool yourself. Don't medicate yourself out of a situation. Don't remove yourself from from your potential, you are going to set up the rest of your life. Your 40s and 50s and 60s feel a long way away when you're in your 20s, but they're not. And they'll be here soon enough. And the work that you do now will set yourself up for very good middle age, and definitely the best time of your life. When I work with people who are in, their 60s plus, when you've lived a life where you've accomplished things, when you've figured out how to accept your lot in life and you've found your true lane, then you can live in love and integrity in the last bit of your life and truly enjoy what life is about.
I love it. Amazing. Yeah. Where can people find you? Where can people connect with you? Where can they reach out? Stuff like that.
I'm active on Twitter and LinkedIn. So
Nice.
you'll see a lot of positive philosophy and work insights on Twitter as well as on LinkedIn. So those are the two places where you can connect with me. Just look for my name, Adam Kreek, with a K.
Awesome. So Adam, I'm really grateful for your time today. I know we went over your scheduled time, I saw, but I really appreciate it. I'm grateful. I'm looking forward to putting your story out there, sharing it. And it was nice, I guess, seeing you again.
Yeah,
So,
well, it was nice to see you again too.
Awesome. So stop.